Welcome to Field Notes, the monthly podcast of modern steel construction, the monthly magazine of AISC. I'm your host, Jeff Weisenberger, Chief Editor of Modern Steel Construction. This month's guest is Helen Torres, President and founder of Helen Torres and Associates, a structural engineering firm based in Chicago. Before she established her own practice in 2020, Helen spent nearly 30 years working in the structural engineering field, focusing on new construction, renovation, and adaptive reuse projects in Chicagoland and across the country, many of which have been located on tight urban sites. And we'll get into that in a little bit. And I also want to mention that she was one of this year's AISC Ideas 2 Award judges. So welcome, Helen. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me. So what brought you into the world of buildings? Were there particular projects, or I should say, structures from your youth that inspired you to get into engineering?
Jeff, I don't have that storybook tale of knowing what I want to be when I grow up. But as I reflect back, growing up in the city, I've always enjoyed taking the elevated trains and being able to look into the buildings downtown in the Loop, and then in the neighborhoods, getting a snapshot of people's backyards. I've always been fascinated by the urban fabric, and Chicago certainly has a lot to offer, and that's true wherever I travel. But I also recall as a child visiting the John Hancock building and being intrigued by its height and simplicity. And even today, still today, the John Hancock is my favorite building. So I think those were the first kind of clues that maybe I'd have a life in the field of architecture career.
Sure. The Hancock's one of my favorites too. And it took me somebody like who is kind of smart about buildings to say, by the way, you look at it from two different angles, it looks like two different buildings. And they were right. There's like the wide angle, and then there's the narrow angle. And, the narrow angle actually, I think, is a little more, from one side is really imposing and the other side is very elegant. But yeah.
Right.
And
the Michigan Avenue side is very elegant.
For sure. Yeah, and good point about the trains, especially the Brown Line, since it's above ground the whole time. Yeah, that's one. If I ever have people visiting, and they want to take the L, I'm like, we should take the Brown Line because you can see the city. You're not underground the whole time. You're not going along the highway. No, that's really great. So from there, when I guess maybe the next question is where did you go to college? And I mean, was it when you got there was engineering or architecture and then the forecast right away, or was it something you had to eventually kind of come to?
I did have a circuitous path to structural engineering. I switched my major twice and switched schools twice before I landed at the University of Illinois at Chicago to study architecture. But once I was studying architecture and immersed in the curriculum, I did feel like I was on the right path. And in the fifth year of the program, you had to choose a focus, which was either design, technology, or structures. Mm-hmm. And I chose structural engineering, because it offered the opportunity for 2 licenses. So I did I started working as a structural engineer. And then having been studying architecture, I wasn't coached that as a structural engineer, you could benefit from having a master's degree, that there would be more opportunities open to you. So after working for 3 years and knowing that I want to stay in structural engineering, I went back to school again, this time at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Mm-hmm. And I enrolled in the civil engineering department to study more structural engineering. And I've stuck with it. And I did get licensed as a structural engineer, but I did not pursue the license as an architect. And I don't regret that.
Sure. Well, that's great to hear. So you've obviously, before starting your own firm, you practiced for it sounds like about 30 years or so. I was just curious when it comes to, in projects that you've designed over the decades, are there any one or two that stand out because of how proud you are of them, or how crazy they drove you, or how like they were maybe particularly significant as far as being a learning experience?
There is one project that stands out for all those reasons, for being a great learning experience, for driving me crazy, and for being particularly proud of it. I worked on a business school at the University of Chicago, and it was the first large-scale project I had was leading as a project engineer. It was 400,000 square feet, and it had, numerous structural challenges, not just one or two, but probably 15 or 20 exotic structural challenges. And it also felt like we were changing things almost up to ribbon cutting. At least that's my recollection. That's how it felt.
Oh, for sure.
That things just kept. And when the project was completed, it was about 4 years before I actually went and visited the facility. And when I did visit it, kind of all that angst sort of melted away because the outcome was just so incredible. All the fussing we had to do and the changes to meet architectural demands, turned out, you could see what your efforts had yielded in this masterpiece, really. So at that point, I was very, very proud of the work we had done. And what I realize now is that, over time, I have just become much better at managing project stresses.
Sure.
Especially during the construction phase, which can be very, very stressful.
Switching gears, can you talk a little bit about your firm? What prompted you to go from, just designing, working for other firms to start your own? And maybe talk a little bit about some of the initial challenges or considerations.
Sure. Well, after 30 years of working for others and spending a lot of time in the corporate world, I just decided it was time to go out on my own and sort of control my own destiny. Certainly, starting from scratch, there were many, many challenges and considerations. And 2.5 years into it, I'm still working through some of them.
Sure.
Simple things like your firm name, the website, the organization, I had to make decisions on pretty quickly. And then once, licenses and all those things were in place, I was pretty quick to apply for certification as a minority and women-owned business, which I had thought would be helpful in securing work, mm-hmm. and indeed it has been. I've really learned an incredible amount. I guess I really didn't realize how much I didn't know when I was starting. But I've learned an incredible amount in the past couple of years, and I'm still learning. But I feel that it has been a success. I'm very proud of the portfolio that we're building. I've been able to work on projects in the same market sectors that I've been working on for years, which is healthcare, mm-hmm. higher ed, science and technology projects, and data centers. And we also have been doing quite a bit of K through 12 work, which has been nice local work for us. So far so good. It has been a crazy time with COVID.
Sure.
We have learned how to be a work from home organization mm-hmm. So far, and open-minded about where that will go.
Okay. So that was going to be another question. I wasn't sure. Did you open up an official office, so to speak, or are you still waiting on that?
I'm still waiting on that. If COVID didn't come our way 2.5 years ago, I would have definitely opened an office because that would have, I believe, just been an expectation.
Sure.
But learning from our work from home experience, I don't see the need just yet. I feel like if we have young staff members that we have to train, that would be really important to be sitting there at the same table. But right now, we're still working from home successfully.
Sure. And yeah, like you were saying, I mean, if this had happened like maybe back in 2018 or even 19, it would have been more of an expectation to have an office. But it's funny how, our expectations have all kind of changed quite a bit in the last few years. But it sounds like it's working out pretty well so far, your current format. So since you've obviously been in the industry for quite a while, I'm curious, over the past 3 decades or so, how have you seen the industry evolving since you've been in it, especially in terms of equity issues?
Well, the progress is I guess I could say it's slow. I don't want to be negative, but where I have seen changes is in school and when I started working, there were always other women, studying or working alongside me. But as a young engineer, sometimes at the project team, when you'd meet at the site or meet to coordinate the project, I would be the only woman at the table. And fast forward 10 years, there were more women at the table. And fast forward 20 years, I was working on a project where the women were in the majority. So there is a recognition that having women lead projects is a good thing. So we do see equity at the project table. There are women leading projects and leading large-scale projects and doing a great job of it. The other place I have seen progress is with professional women's organizations.
Okay.
And that's a great resource for women. I belong to Women in Structural Engineering, WISE, which is a SCAOI organization.
Okay.
There's also a new organization in Chicago called Professional Women in Construction, which brings all the fields, construction fields, under one umbrella, and that's really nice to see. I know there's Chicago Women in Architecture. There's just a lot of women organizations that are getting traction.
Good. Yeah,
so that is progress.
Yeah, indeed. That is great to hear. Well, on that note, I was curious, do you have any advice for young women who are thinking about studying engineering or, considering it as a profession, or who are already in it and ready to go out into the construction world in general?
Yes, certainly the construction industry offers great careers if you enjoy teamwork and problem solving. And what is so great about it is that you actually can see your efforts in the built world. That is unique. My advice for a young woman is what I had just said, to join these professional organizations so you can build your network outside of your office or your classroom. Another piece of advice, which I wish I had the advantage of earlier in my career, is to visit engineersrising.com. Stephanie Slocum is like the patron saint of structural engineers. She has very sage advice for women, and I'm sure anybody could benefit from taking a look at their website and more. And I guess my last piece of advice, based on my circuitous route to finding my passion, is that if you find that you don't have passion for what you're doing, find the courage to change your path, because your career could easily be 40 years long. So there is time, and find that courage and do it.
No, that's great advice. No, that's a very good point. You don't want to necessarily do something for 40 years if you're not really enjoying it.
Right. It's a long time.
Indeed. Well, so I just want to switch gears and talk a little bit about the Ideas Awards. We'll be running the winners in our May issue. And thanks again for being one of the judges. I'm just curious, did you have any, general observations about the judging experience itself, or was there anything that jumped out at you in particular?
I really enjoyed the experience, and I thought that AISC did just an amazing job at pulling the team together. We had two practicing structural engineers, a practicing architect, a fabricator, and a constructor. So we had all aspects of a building, and it brought different viewpoints to the table. So, something that maybe we thought was sort of ordinary from a structural engineering perspective, could have been extremely complicated from a fabricating or constructing perspective. So that was a real treat to be at that table and to hear everybody's different perspective. And I think we all enjoyed it and had a good time, and we're pleased with the outcome.
Very good. Yeah, no, we're definitely pleased with the outcome. I've seen what's been chosen for the finalists, and they're all fantastic projects. I've been part of that process before, and I know it's different every year because we have a different group of judges every year. But I know in some years it seems like people can really kind of come together quickly and get some consensus on certain projects, and in others there are passionate defenders of certain projects, and some of them definitely have to be advocated for, so to speak, because, like you said, because of those different perspectives, everybody might be on one, and somebody might go, oh, but what about this for this one? So I don't know. I thought it was a pretty lively debate, and
I think we came to consensus pretty quick. I mean, we didn't agree on everything, but I think we agreed to disagree.
Sure.
We're necessary to move on.
Yeah, that seems to be a good tactic for a lot of different topics out there. Well, that's great to hear. I'm glad you enjoyed the process. And oh my gosh, it has to be fun, right? If it's not fun, I mean, come on.
It was. It was definitely a good day. It was a fun day.
Good. So yeah, switching away from buildings and engineering and awards, what are some of your outside interests?
I would say my foremost outside interest is gardening.
Okay.
I'm an avid flower gardener, which right now, I get a break from, but I spend a lot of time in the other 3 seasons out in the yard, and I find it very therapeutic to get my hands dirty. I did realize this year that all of a sudden I now have an indoor plant collection, which I haven't had for years. But now that my kids are getting older, it looks like I'm finding other things to do with my time.
Sure, and maybe you have more room in the house for plants now.
Yeah, a little bit of more time to organize and find room. Yeah, I also enjoy. I enjoy cooking and entertaining and spending time with my family.
You brought up gardening. I'm curious. I know there's we live where we live. Like you said, it's really only 3 seasons, maybe not even that here in Chicagoland, as far as growing things outside. But have you had, besides like more kind of go-to plants, have you had any that like with Sherlock Holmes and the violin, where you're like, oh, I want this one to work, but this is the most challenging plant I've ever had to deal with?
There have been those plants that I really wanted to have in my garden, and I might have bought 2 or 3 years in a row and moved them in a different spot. But I know when to quit. So I seem to be more fond now of plants that are happy to be here and grow easily, and that I can share with my neighbors.
Sure. No, that's a good point. I like that. Know when to quit. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you're not trying to force any palm trees into the soil here.
Oh, no. Always just trying to grow what's happy to be in Chicago.
No, that's great. Yeah, no, that's a good point, especially about, just kind of trying to find native things and what's appropriate to grow. So speaking, of Chicago, can you say maybe 1 or 2 things you like most about the area? What about you living here, and maybe any tips for people who are visiting?
Sure. I do think one of the most amazing parts about living in Chicago is having the lakefront, that it just offers this dynamic boundary, ever-changing, and a lot of outdoor opportunities, be it a beach day or, the air and water show or a bike ride. I think Chicago wouldn't be the same if it didn't have Lake Michigan on its side. We also have so many wonderful cultural institutions and museums and parks and food and shopping and neighborhoods that just could go on and on. If you're coming to Chicago to visit, of course, you have to check the weather forecast, because it can change drastically in a day, and you want to be prepared so you can enjoy the sights. When I have guests come into town, my favorite outing, the first outing, if we have more than, we have only one day, the one outing we would do for sure would be to take a riverboat cruise, and you have a different perspective on the buildings, the architecture on the river, and to see the river walk. And then to go to the 96th floor of the John Hancock building, where you could have drinks and snacks and get the views of the city, but while, relaxing a little bit and having a drink.
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, no, it is a wonderful view up there. And I've taken that boat tour a couple of times, and it doesn't get old. I love it.
Right. It does not get old, no matter how many people you take on it. That's for sure.
Yeah, and they've really done a good job developing the Riverwalk down here. So that's become a more interesting and inviting environment, I feel like, along the river.
Absolutely.
That wraps up another edition of Modern Steel Construction's Field Notes podcast. Again, our guest this time around has been Helen Torres, president and founder of Helen Torres & Associates, and I'm your host, Jeff Weisenberger. Thanks for listening, everyone.